I'm here today to tell you our story. A story that starts out with two people in love, getting married and looking forward to the rest of their life together. On January 3rd, I married the love of my life, Ralph Thompson, and became Mrs. Mandy Thompson. And knew that life would be challenging. He and I had already been through our own challenges together and had grown closer together, and knew that life wasn't easy. He and I have both faced a lot of medical issues our whole lives, and when I got a call, trying to even think of where to start, I guess the January 3rd, it was funny because I remember the pastor that at the courthouse did our, the blessing over our marriage and had us repeat after him. He never said, for better, for worse, for richer or poorer, in sickness and in health, which I thought was really funny because he and I have already gone through a lot of that together, him helping me with my health and me, making sure that he's keeping up with his and helping him when I can. And then 5 days later, seeing Ralph in the morning, saying goodbye to him after he stopped at my house briefly. And I remember thinking to myself, I should have kissed him goodbye. I should have hugged him. I wish I would have, asked him for a hug before he rushed out the door to get his car fixed. He was borrowing a battery that worked because his battery had died the night before at work. And partway to the store, somebody pulled out in front of him, and he ended up shattering his C2 and fracturing C3 in his neck. The doctors pretty much said that they were surprised that he didn't damage his spinal cord or his artery through those vertebrae because of how badly shattered C2 was. I got a call from the nurses at the hospital letting me know that he had been in an accident. He had asked them to call me right away, and when I got there, he was completely stiff laying on the bed. He wasn't moving at all, and I remember wheeling myself in my wheelchair and seeing him laying there and not being sure how bad the injuries were, not knowing, if he was responsive, if he was okay. And I went over to him and held his hand, and he told me he couldn't move his neck, that he had to keep his neck completely still. And the nurses explained the injury and the severity of it. A couple days later, I guess the next day, they took him out of the neck brace and put a halo on him, which involves a very uncomfortable, itchy brace type vest and a very large metal brace that basically screwed into his forehead and the sides of his head. And I was in the room while they were putting it on and hearing how much pain he was in as they moved his neck around and put the halo on, and wishing that there was something I could do to make it better, that there was something that I could do to make him feel better. Being thankful that I was able to at least be there. So he stayed in that hospital for a while, and then they transferred him to a different hospital for therapy. And as they were doing his therapy, they realized that he was losing blood. He was actually going down pretty rapidly in blood counts, so they had to give him blood. They had to stop the therapy. Took him off his Coumadin, which with his heart condition is actually really dangerous. He has an artificial heart valve due to some heart malformations and a connective tissue disorder that he has called Marfan syndrome. And if they take him off of the Coumadin for more than a few days, and even a few days is risky, he could have his heart valve not work, or he could end up throwing a clot. So I was pretty nervous about them taking him off it, but I also understood that they needed to find the cause of the bleeding, or he would continue bleeding and lose too much blood. So the doctors were trying to find the source of the bleeding and did some testing and some scopes and found out that he had a mass in his colon. Initially, they didn't talk about what type of mass it was. They just said that they saw, a spot in his colon and wanted to look at it and make sure that it was not something dangerous, but that they thought that that may be the cause of the bleeding. So they scheduled surgery, and I called around and posted trying to find a ride to get to the surgery, and didn't get a whole lot of response, and was really scared that I wasn't going to be able to be there for him. And after everything I've been through medically, I know how hard that is to go through surgery without family or friends or anybody there. And the last thing that I wanted to do was have my husband be alone, and not be able to be there to make sure that everything's okay and to know what's happening. Somebody blessed us who really didn't know either of us in person, but was friends with Ralph on Facebook. She had seen my looking for a ride and saw that I wasn't getting responses, and she stepped up and said, I just can't let you, not have help when you need it. This is important. And she drove me to the hospital, and she sat with me patiently. We got there a little bit late, and we were afraid that we weren't going to get to see him at all before his surgery. Thankfully, a nurse came in and, said, that they were just getting him prepped, and that, we would be able to go back before the surgery to talk to him. When I went back, the doctors were talking about how they weren't sure if they were going to be able to do the abdominal surgery because of where the vest was placed from the halo. And the doctor kept asking, this was probably the fourth doctor over the last couple weeks who kept asking, can we move the halo? Can we shift it? Can we adjust it? Can we take it off or move it in some way to make more space for us to be able to do the things we need to do? He had been through that already with cardiology as well. Thankfully, after I very clearly stated that, there was no way in hell that that was going to happen, because, Ralph and I would not agree to having the halo moved because of the risks to his spinal cord and his artery and his neck. The anesthesiologist stepped in and said, there's no way we're going to do the surgery if you're going to move the vest. I will not do the surgery along your side if you're going to move the vest or the halo or anything else. He said, you're not touching it. And I appreciated that so much. Him standing beside us and, knowing how dangerous it would be for them to move the vest or the halo. He stood beside us and, kind of fought for what needed to be done. And, at the same time, I understood how the surgeon was feeling. He wanted to make sure that he could get to everything he needed to. But he was a very good surgeon, and I'm really thankful that Ralph was blessed with the surgeon that he had. So after I said goodbye to Ralph, I went and waited in the waiting room for the 5-hour surgery. And about 5 hours later, after they had called me to let me know how things were going throughout the prep time, finally ended up not hearing anything 5 hours in, and that was scary, because I was expecting things to be at least close to done and still didn't hear. And at that point, all of the stress from, that few weeks just started really coming over me, and I just kind of fell apart. And I had some really wonderful friends who stopped up to support me and be there for me, and to help me through that time, and to pray with me for Ralph. And finally, the doctor came out and basically said that the mass in Ralph's colon that was causing the bleeding was cancer, and that wasn't something I was prepared to hear. It just didn't feel fair after everything he'd been through and after all the pain that he's gone through with his neck, and then to hear that he had cancer as well. And then waiting the 5 days for the biopsy to come back was overwhelming. We found out that the biopsy so far looks good, but it's still, he's going to have to be kept an eye on now because of him having it so young. Ralph has, still continued to try to heal up from the surgery. He's still in the hospital and being missed every day. And meanwhile, I'm trying to get my entire house packed up to move today or tomorrow, depending on when we find out that we can move into the new house. And with my own medical issues and me being kind of under the weather right now to begin with some allergy issues, and flare-ups with my autonomic dysfunction, I'm hoping that we get everything ready on time, and that we can move in today, because I don't know what we'll do if we can't move in, by today or tomorrow. I need to be out of my current home by tomorrow, and I've had some really wonderful friends who come alongside of us to, help me pack and help me clean, but there's still a lot left to do. And, I can't thank Ralph's employer enough. The Cherry Street Mission has been such a huge support to us and such a huge encouragement to me, and I know to Ralph as well, dealing with me worrying about when things are going to happen and whether things are going to be okay. I'm thankful that, they've been patient with me and that they've been there for Ralph and I, because it's been a really hard month. And I guess this is all to say, we're facing a lot of financial challenges now with Ralph not able to work and not being sure when he'll be able to work again, or if he'll be able to work again, and me dealing with my own medical issues, being unable to work. We just weren't prepared for this when we were getting ready to move to the new house. So we appreciate everybody's support, and we appreciate the donations that people have given on our GoFundMe page. Can't thank you enough for the love that you've shown us and the care that you've shown us and the compassion that we've experienced from friends and family and people that we're acquaintances with online, and even people we don't know. Thank you so much for being there and for praying us through this difficult time. I'm really looking forward to when Ralph can come home from the hospital and we can be together again. Thank you, everybody.